It's time for ROTD Weekend. Canadian Thanksgiving is 1 week away, and I have done something really fun to celebrate and get us all in the mood. And that is that my team and I have created a personality quiz to determine which festive dish is a perfect fit for you. It is really fun, really cute. I cannot wait for you to go check it out. So go and take this holiday themed personality quiz over at cookthestory.com/quiz. And yeah, I can't wait to see what you think. It's really, really cute. And I'm kind of obsessed with it. I've done it like 4 times myself now, and I really love it. I think you will too. So that is at cookthestory.com/quiz. I'm also getting underway with some preparations to do a little Canadian Thanksgiving dinner here. It turns out that Canadian Thanksgiving this year falls on a weekend that I don't have my kids. They're at their dad's. And so I was thinking of like not doing anything. It's just like me and Marty. And then I was like, oh, wait, what if we just have some of our like adult friends over and do kind of like a Thanksgiving dinner party in October? So that is happening. And I've just started planning the menu. I think I have several vegetarians coming and one person who is dairy free. So I am doing some thinking and figuring out what direction I want to take this in. I think with several vegetarians on the guest list, I want to, emphasize the side dishes because that is such a delicious, wonderful part of Thanksgiving. Although not as much of Canadian Thanksgiving from like what I remember Canadian Thanksgiving when I was growing up, and maybe this was just my family, but it might not have been, was the turkey stuffing, gravy, mashed potatoes for sure, and a vegetable, often something like carrots with some dill on them, or even like mixed veggies sometimes I think, or like a big salad, probably some dinner rolls and butter. Most dinners like this, buffet dinners and holiday dinners in at least the part of Canada that I was from, tended to also have meatballs in like a beef gravy. That seemed to be always there. And then because my family is Ukrainian, quite often at the holiday dinners, but not always, there would also be pierogies and cabbage rolls. But yeah, there was no green bean casserole. There was no sweet potato casserole, no marshmallows anywhere for sure. Definitely there was no mac and cheese. But yeah, I mean, mashed potatoes are a side dish, stuffing and gravy are a side dish. I just mean more those casserole kind of things. I used to do, I should totally do that for this one. Years ago when I did a big Thanksgiving dinner when I was living in Toronto, I would invite all the grad students who didn't have family to go to if they were either away from their family or like some of the students were from Japan and had never celebrated Thanksgiving at all before. So I would do a big dinner at our place, and there were several vegetarians in that group, and I would do this. It was a butternut squash gratin dish. So it's slices of butternut squash that you roast, and then it has this like creamy sauce and a breadcrumb coating. You know what? I think there is a recipe for this on Cook the Story from a long time ago that was based on this. I'm going to look for that. But it was really nice because it's like meaty and hearty, that butternut squash, so it could like substitute in as like a main course. And so that one I did do, but that was just because of a like special dietary requirement I was trying to help out with, not something that I grew up having. Yeah, I don't remember there being those sorts of casseroles at Canadian Thanksgiving, but my guests for my Canadian Thanksgiving dinner here are all American, and so I think I can play around and go in any direction. And maybe because it's all grown-ups, I could even do more like fancy appetizer style kind of things. I don't know. I am still in the planning stages. I just really think it's fun to do Canadian Thanksgiving living in Florida as I do now. It's like I get pre-Thanksgiving, I get to get into this like fall festive mood, even though it doesn't look or feel like fall outside, but I get to pretend in October, and that is a lot of fun for me for sure. What is also a lot of fun for me, for sure, is that I got to have the conversation that I did with our guest today. I am speaking with Cheryl Norris, who is the blogger behind bakesbybrownsugar.com. And Cheryl was also a contestant on the Great American Baking Show. How cool is that? You are going to love this conversation. Let's listen. Cheryl Norris, welcome to the show.
Hi, Christine. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk with you because I think your website's origin story is really interesting to me and probably interesting to others. So what was the big thing that prompted you to start your blog?
I think the big thing was just my love of baking. And I originally started sharing pictures on Instagram. And then for me, after a while, that wasn't enough because I wanted to talk about the recipes that I was sharing and explain to people why these recipes work, the science of the baking. Ever since I got a hold of Rose Levy Berenbaum's Cake Bible, I bought it when it first came out. In 88, I'm probably dating myself, and learned about the science of baking. I was just like, it opened up this whole new world for me because I'm one of those people, like, show me how it works, explain to me how it works so then I can go do that. And so between my mom, what she taught me, and Rose Levy Berenbaum's book, from there, my passion for baking just took off.
Well, and you're an engineer. Like, you're not just interested in how things work. You are figuring it out all the time,
yes,
right?
Figuring out. Yeah. The thing I love about the science of baking is that you can take any baking recipe and you can scale it. Once you have that base recipe and you understand how the ingredients work, you can scale it up, scale it down. Mm-hmm. And when I write my recipes, especially like something like my cupcake recipes, I actually try to design a recipe that readers can easily take it and cut it in half. So I have volume measurements on my site and metric, by grams, by weight, so that people can take that recipe and easily cut it in half.
Oh yeah, I like that. And I think people hear this all the time, and because I'm not really a baker, I'm not sure I fully understand, but by using the weights, you're just a little bit more specific and it's more controlled than the volume measurements, right?
Yeah, by using weights, it's easier to be consistent because, if you say 250 grams of flour, that's always going to be 250 grams. But when someone just says just 2 cups, I really have to read the recipe and understand, okay, how did they measure this 2 cups? Because that can be anywhere from 240 grams to 300 grams of flour, depending on how they measured that flour.
I know that you are not, maybe you are an expert in this. We will find out, but I know this is not something that's probably true where you are. So, I moved from central Canada to Florida. And when I did that, I also had a new baby and life was changing and I stopped cooking and baking as much. But I used to love baking bread. I would make the odd cake. Here, things don't turn out as well. And I keep saying it's because the flour is too humid.
That could be because flour can absorb moisture. It can dry out. Like if you were to sit a bowl of flour on the counter, uncover it and let it sit there for a couple days or something, it will dry out. And that'll show up, like, say, when you go to make pie dough. So let's say you normally keep your flour in a container. You make pie dough, you need half a cup of water. If you let your flour sit out for a few days, you might end up needing an extra 2 tablespoons because the flour has started to dry out.
Yeah, so it's something like that. I know actually even my mom was here. So I've told her this before. We have a family recipe for this Ukrainian Easter bread. It's called Pascha bread. And she made it while I was gone. And I had told her before that when I make it, it's the same recipe we've been making all these years, all of her life, my grandmother's life. I make it and I just have to keep adding more flour and more flour and more flour. And I'm sure she believed me, but then she actually did it. I was away and she did it. She's like, I don't know what happened with this bread. I just had to keep adding more flour. It's so weird.
Yep.
So do you think if we weighed the flour, that would make a difference, or the humidity weight thing is a different ballgame?
I think it's a combination of both because you have the more humid climate. Start out by weighing the flour and then slowly add the water. So maybe the water that you normally add to the recipe, maybe don't add as much to begin with and kind of see what the texture looks like, because that's the other part of baking. So yeah, you're obviously weighing ingredients, but you're also going by the look and the feel of something. And so as you're working with this bread dough, you guys know how it should feel.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know how much water is in the recipe, but maybe start with half the amount of water and then
Hmm.
slowly add, a tablespoon at a time till it gets to that right
Yeah.
feel.
Instead of doing the amount of liquid, it's one of these, it's like a yeast bread. So you start with the
Yep.
liquid and then you add, you know what I mean? So we could
Yep.
start with less liquid and add flour and yeah, that would work. So I wanna back up. I know you're an engineer. I know you have this wonderful, it's bakesbyBrownSugar.com website, but you also were on the Great American Baking Show, right?
Yes, I got to do that in 2018. And I tell people it was the most stressful fun I've ever had.
That's so crazy. So how did you even end up there? Is it a selection process? How did that happen?
It is a selection process. So first saw the American version, I believe in 2016. And I said,
Mhm.
I think I could do that. Because they truly are amateur bakers. I mean,
Right.
very talented amateur bakers, but I thought I'm an amateur. I could do that. So the first time I applied, I didn't make it. And then I came back and I got a call in May that says, hey, we got your application and we want to do an on phone interview. And I said, okay, great. I said, oh, no, I know what it was. They called me and they asked me to resubmit my application. And I said, oh, did I do something wrong? And so what had happened was the application had opened up January 1st of that year. And January 1st, I submitted it. What I didn't know was shortly after that, they took everything down to revamp it. And so I was one of those few people who had gotten in early. And so they needed to resubmit it. And so I went through the application process, which was like a month and a half process. So I think I can share this. So they do the interview, they do the Skype or Zoom interview, I guess just to get a feel for you. And
Uh,
then they say, okay, we'd like to invite you to the auditions. So when you go to the audition, you have to take baked goods with you. It's an in-person audition and they
with
send you the
food.
Yes, they send you this brief of what you need to prepare. I think it was 3 recipes we had to prepare. So I'm flying from Portland to Los Angeles for this
Oh
audition.
my,
I've got this cake and I'm walking through the airport with this big Costco bag and the cake container in the Costco bag. The other recipes are in my carry-on suitcase.
oh my God.
And I'm walking through the airport, like my arm is out straight because I want to hold the bag and make sure it stays level the entire time I'm walking through the airport. And I go through security. I'm like, oh, there's a cake in here. Don't turn it on its side. It needs to stay upright. Blah. I'm like going through this whole spiel. And the guy's just looking at me like, okay.
Oh my God. What the people at the airport security must see. You got a big cake in your bag. Okay. Okay. Just go like,
Yeah. Just put it on just put it on the conveyor. It'll be fine.
oh, that's amazing. So a month and a half and you have to bake
Yeah, it's
stuff to
just,
show up.
they're
Yeah.
asking questions, they're asking for more information. And when I got the word, I was driving for work and I recognized the number. So I hit the thing on the dashboard and it was like, Cheryl, this is Mary. We want to let you know that you got on. I screamed so loud. She said, I think you split my eardrum.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
And so I said, well, okay, wait a minute. I got to pull over. I can't drive with, after you just told me this, let me pull over, find a spot to pull over. And so, I was on the phone with them for, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes while they explained the basics. But yeah, it was
Mhm.
intense because then once you get accepted, there's a baking boot camp where you spend a month working on your recipes for the show.
Oh,
Yeah. So going into the show, we know what we're going to bake
okay.
because you get to practice it. And that's the other thing I like about it. Because if you watch the British show, the American, you will see like the bakers have notes in front of them, or the judges will say something like, oh, did it turn out when you practiced it, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I've seen that before, and I guess I assumed that everybody had like a repertoire of things. Like you
Mhm.
come with like 20 recipes that you've done at home or something, and
Yeah.
you're hoping that one is going to be right, or maybe you're going to
Yeah.
use the icing from this one with the cake from that one because of the challenge, but you know
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah, because they send you the brief. They say, we need this type of recipe. And then you send the recipe off for them. And so for the whole month of July, I would come home from work and I'm practicing the recipes. I would often go to bed like at midnight,
Wow.
and get up the next morning, go to work and then come home as soon as I could because yeah, each week I had to do like four recipes. I had to like practice and figure out four
That's a
recipes
lot.
in a
Yeah.
week because then I had to send it off to them and say, okay, here's what I'm doing. And then you're on the phone with the culinary producer, asking them questions, getting clarity. Maybe once they send the recipe, you send them the recipe, then they're getting back to you saying, are you sure this is going to work? Or
Oh, wow.
I was so tired that towards the end, my oven stopped working. I was like, no. And so I'm waiting for the electrician to come and I sit down. It's like, well, I might as well like write some stuff out, blah, blah, blah. I sat down and I immediately fell asleep. Like
Oh, no.
nothing got written. I was like, I passed out right away.
That's crazy. Wow. Well, what an experience. And then the show, were they as lovely in person as they are on TV?
They are. Yeah. So for that year, it was Paul Hollywood and Sherry Yard were the judges. And so Paul was really nice. Sherry Yard was a sweetheart. She like had a smile on her face. I swear the whole time. She said later she was just so excited to be there. So it was great. It was great working with them. The production staff, they were super nice, super kind. And so, as I said, even though it was the most stressful fun, I think it was fun because one, you got the opportunity to be there.
Mhm.
And then just people were just nice in general. So yeah, it was great. And one of my recipes for a gingerbread cake, Paul Hollywood said it was the best gingerbread cake he'd ever had. So I
Oh,
was like,
wow. That's so nice. What a nice compliment. Well, I know the recipes on your site look delicious, beautiful, and so I can't even imagine what kind
thank
of
you.
delicious things you made on the show. Now, have you brought a surprise recipe of the day for me today?
I have, and I'm
Ooh,
excited to share it.
I'm excited. What is it?
So it is vanilla shortbread cookies with fresh vanilla bean. And I
Oh.
absolutely love, love, love this recipe. It's one of my new favorites. I will admit, every time I have a new recipe, I sometimes say that it's my new favorite.
I actually totally know that. I was just talking, Marty's my boyfriend, and we were trying to decide what to have for dinner, like do like a meal plan last week. And he's like, I think we're having the same thing every day, like every week. And I'm like, yeah, because those are my favorites right now. He's like, okay, let's try to remember some favorites from 2 months ago. Cause I get like
Yeah.
stuck in those ruts. It's really funny. Oh yeah, this sounds amazing. And with the vanilla bean frosting, I love it.
So it doesn't have vanilla bean frosting. I put vanilla bean in the cookie dough. And one of the things I discovered as I was testing was that salted butter with the vanilla, oh my word, it is amazing. Like that, just that extra hit of salt, extra
Yeah.
hit of saltiness with the vanilla
Yeah.
just makes the vanilla even more vanilla.
Oh, that
If
sounds
that's what
exciting.
works.
Well, because normally people often bake with unsalted butter, right? And then they're
And I do
controlling,
too. Yeah.
usually do, but for this one, you're using salted butter.
Yeah, as I was testing the recipe, I actually divided, for some reason in my head, I was like, you know what? I think this would taste better with more salt. So I divided the recipe into two. I cut it in half, and one half of the dough I did with my regular amount of salt. And then for the other half, I put in more salt just to kind of see. And the cookie with the more salt, it just, to me, it actually just accentuated the vanilla bean in the cookie.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just felt like there was more vanilla flavor.
Nice.
So then I went back and tested it again with salted butter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, yeah, it exceeded my expectations in terms of flavor. And then the other thing I did for this was I added an egg yolk and just that the fattiness from the egg yolk just made the cookie softer. But I think also it just really complemented, again, that vanilla flavor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Since I used vanilla bean, it just really complemented that vanilla flavor.
Well, I am excited to find out how to make this. It sounds delicious. And
Okay.
we've talked about this. I don't have the craziest of sweet tooth, but I do love desserts that have that hit of salt. Like
Mhm.
that sort of does it
Yep.
for me. So I'm super excited about this. Where do you start when you're making these cookies?
So we start with the three basic ingredients, which are the flour, sugar, and butter. And that's the basis for all my shortbread recipes. I discovered this recipe years ago that gives you these perfect shortbread cookies that don't spread. They hold their shape. So, especially if you really love to present something that looks beautiful, then this is the recipe for you. Plus it tastes good. So the other thing about this recipe is you have to weigh the ingredients. It's a ratio recipe. So it is 12 ounces of flour, 8 ounces of butter, and 4 ounces of sugar. Call it a 3-2-1
Right.
shortbread cookie.
Yeah,
So you
yeah, yeah.
gotta weigh the ingredients. I've gotten pushback over the years with people would complain that I only listed things by weight.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I would just tell them, I said, yeah, in order for this to work, you got to weigh the ingredients because when I first started my blog and I had this recipe and people were complaining, I posted things by volume, like, oh, here's, cups. But then people would complain, well, the dough never came together and it was too dry. And I said, okay, nope, I'm going back to the weight. Because I think
Yeah.
what happened, people were probably just not measuring the flour correctly
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and adding too much, which ended up with, the dry, crumbly dough that won't hold together.
mm-hmm.
Or sometimes they would say, "Oh, the cookie spread too much." I'm like, "Nope, you didn't add enough flour." I've done this recipe so many times. I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely know there's no way this cookie should spread
Mm.
if you're weighing the ingredients.
Okay, so you have this 3-2-1 flour, sugar, butter. Are you creaming the flour and butter? The butter softened, cold? Where are we going here?
Yes. So, okay, it actually starts with you want to take your vanilla bean and you want to scrape it and put those vanilla seeds in the sugar. So put the sugar in a small bowl, scrape the vanilla bean and put that in the sugar and then rub that vanilla into the sugar
With your fingers?
with your fingers.
Ah.
What this does is that friction between the sugar and the vanilla releases more of that flavor.
Mm.
Plus it ensures that your vanilla bean is evenly distributed throughout the dough. Because if you were to just drop it into because when you scrape vanilla bean, you have a clump of vanilla beans. It's really moist. And if you were to just drop that into, say, cream butter and sugar, it could end up with, you've got these clumps throughout your dough and it doesn't evenly distribute. So we start there. And once that's done, we put the sugar and the butter in the mixing bowl and we cream that for about 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You just really want to make sure it's creamy. You're not trying to introduce a lot of air into it. And it's softened butter. And so I tell readers, softened butter is typically room temperature, which is about 65 to 68 degrees. You don't want it too warm because if it's butter that's in the 70s, it'll kind of just slop around, smear around the bowl. And then if it's too cold, you won't get the butter and the sugar to combine correctly.
This is why me baking in Florida doesn't work. There's no way my house is ever that temperature. It's never that cold outside. It's never that cold inside. It's always in the 70s here in my house.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And yeah. And I'll be honest, when I'm baking in the summer, especially for the blog, I start the day with the AC on. Even though we are not as hot as it gets in Florida, if I left it alone, the AC probably wouldn't come on until 1 or 2 o'clock. If I'm going to be doing a lot of baking, I just turn it on first thing in the morning so the house stays cool.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. The AC runs continuously here and it never gets below 72.
Oh, no.
And I have 2 air conditioners. There's one on each floor. I'm exaggerating. I mean, we don't set it below 72 because it's hot. It's hot here. But yeah, now I'm learning. So the humidity in the flour is my first problem. I need to weigh it and add less liquid. And my butter is probably always too warm.
Yeah, it could be. So maybe just wait right before, you go to bake to bring it out and then just kind of watch it. Maybe, because if I forget to take the butter out the night before, I take it out first thing in the morning and then maybe I'm waiting, maybe 3 hours for it to cool off. I mean, there's a way you can speed that up, but usually by the time I get through with everything else during the day, I don't start baking maybe till say 10 o'clock on a Saturday or something like that. So, and I'm sorry, I forgot to say in the beginning too, before you start everything. So I believe in a mise en place where you get everything set up, because what can happen is if you don't measure everything out and you're trying to measure stuff as you're mixing stuff, you can easily mismeasure, add too much, because you're trying to kind of rush it. So any recipe should start with mise en place. So we already talked about, you got the sugar in the bowl. You should also weigh your butter. And the reason I tell people to weigh your butter, because in the United States, it comes in those sticks. So what I have found over time is 8 tablespoons of butter should weigh about 113 grams. I'm not calling out any brands, but having tried various brands, I have found that they range anywhere from 103 grams to 109 grams.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, not the full, not the full. So now I'm more and more telling people to even weigh your butter. I know here, people in Europe who read my blog, the butter usually comes in 1 pound sticks or 1 pound blocks. So they got to weigh the butter because I'm not always using 1 pound of butter.
Hmm.
But here in the United States, since we have the quarter sticks, more and more I'm telling people weigh your butter to
And
make sure you have the right amount.
and I know this is not exactly what you mean, but I know that a lot of American recipes online will call for the sticks without listing any kind of other amount, 1 stick,
Yep.
2 sticks. And in Canada, they don't have those sticks. So I have relatives and friends who tell me they get annoyed because they can never remember how much is a stick again. And they're
Hmm.
having to like Google for how much butter in a stick. And they've even just hit the back button on a recipe. If they're reading the recipe and it says 2 sticks of butter, they're like, I'm not going to this one. Like, that's not information that I have.
Yep.
So
Yep. And I used
specific.
to do that when I first started the blog, but I think and I probably need to go back and look at old recipes, but more and more I list tablespoons and I list the weight,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no,
number of
that's
tablespoons.
very
So
helpful.
measure out your butter. You can go ahead and put that in the mixing bowl. And then also you want to measure out your flour and then sift that into a large bowl. And sifting flour just aerates it, gets rid of any lumps or anything like
Hmm.
this. And you have to use all-purpose flour. You don't want to use cake flour because that would be too soft.
Hmm.
And that's an instance of where your cookies would spread if you were to use cake flour instead
Okay.
of all-purpose flour. So we have creamed the butter and the sugar. You want to add an egg yolk. So you separated your egg and you're going to keep the egg white because this is a slice and bake cookie. And so we're going to use that egg white to brush that cookie log that we're going to form and put turbinado sugar on it later.
Oh,
So separate your egg, add the egg yolk to the cream butter and sugar, and then just mix that till just it's mixed in, is really well incorporated. Again, we're not trying to aerate the batter or the cookie dough. Then you want to add all your flour all at once. And then you're just going to mix on low speed and one of the reasons you mix on low speed, two reasons. One, if you were to like start your mixer, say on medium speed, flour would fly everywhere. So you want to mix on low speed until the flour is mostly incorporated. The dough is going to look somewhat crumbly, like large breadcrumbs. And then you want to increase it to say medium and then just mix until the dough comes together in large clumps. And because of the extra fat and moisture added by the egg yolk, that's only going to take a couple minutes. And it's just going to be, 2, 3 large clumps of dough.
okay.
So now your dough is ready. You're going to take that out and mixer, and you're going to knead it a little bit because you want to kind of flatten it to remove any air pockets that have just naturally occurred in the dough. Then you're going to divide it in half and you're going to roll it into 2 logs. They're going to be about 6 inches long. Let's see. Yeah, about 6 inches long, inch and a half high or
Okay.
diameter. And that's one of the reasons you want to press the dough to remove any air pockets so that when you later go to cut the dough, you don't have these like holes in your dough.
Hmm.
And you could do one long log, but to me, it's easier one to handle 2 shorter logs like that are 6 inch. Plus, it's easier to store in the refrigerator.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So one of the tricks I learned in making the slice and bake cookies is to save your paper towel rolls, the center.
Oh,
And what you want to do for the cookie logs is you just cut the log in half lengthwise, and then you place your cookie log in that paper towel holder. And what it does when you set it in the refrigerator, it keeps its round shape. Because typically if you just were to wrap the cookie log, which you do, you wrap it in wax paper and you place it on your shelf, that bottom side flattens. I mean, the
right.
cookie's still good and it's still going to look pretty, but if you want to keep that
Yeah,
perfectly
yeah,
round
yeah,
cookie,
yeah.
the
That's
paper towel
perfect.
roll.
I love it.
So
I
I
love it.
actually have old paper towel rolls sitting up in my cabinet behind my mixing bowls.
That's brilliant. I love that idea. Yeah. And I think, you could imagine, right, that things are sometimes sold that way too, right? You get
Mhm.
like different round things that come like a bonbon kind of thing. I love that. Okay. So do you have to refrigerate the dough or can you proceed right away?
You do have to refrigerate the dough.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's the key for the shortbread cookies, keeping their shape. So there are 2 ways you could do this dough. You could actually just roll the dough out and cut the cookie shapes out and refrigerate them like that. Now, for the cookie dough logs, you're going to refrigerate them for at least an hour, and you can do up to 2 days. If you want to make these ahead, you can wrap them in the wax paper, then wrap them in foil, stick them in a freezer bag, and put them in the freezer. And what you want to do too, lesson learned, is write the date on the freezer bag because it's going to be good for about 2 to 3 months in the freezer.
Okay.
So you want to know when you put that in there and not be like me, like you discover this package like a year later, like, ooh, when did I make these?
Yes, that doesn't sound great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so they're in the fridge, and you said you could roll them out and cut them into shapes, so then you would put them like
Yes.
on a parchment lined pan in
Yeah,
the
so we
fridge.
do a parchment lined cookie sheet. And in that case, because they're thinner, they only need to be in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. But with the log, because of that thickness of the log, the length and
Hmm.
everything,
Hmm.
you're going to refrigerate them for at least an hour in the log.
And
And
if
like I
you
said, you can do it up to 2 days.
and if you're gonna roll it out and cut shapes, how thick are you rolling it to?
Half an inch.
Half an inch. Gotcha.
Yeah. You could do thinner. I like the half inch. I love that thick, soft cookie when it's a
Yeah.
half inch.
Well, in short,
But you could do a quarter inch.
I think you're right. I think shortbread, you need both the like crunch on the outside and that like little softness, that buttery
Yes,
softness, right? And I think if it's too
hmm
thin, you don't get both.
that's true. Yeah, no, definitely true.
Yeah. Okay. So once they've refrigerated, what's next?
Yes. So about 15 minutes before they come out of the refrigerator, you want to preheat your oven to 325 degrees and you want to line a half baking sheet with parchment paper.
Hmm.
Now, I like parchment paper better than Silpat because I found that because of the surface friction on the parchment paper, the cookies don't spread at all. Like with Silpat, the bottom will flare out a little bit, like the top of the cookie will stay as is, but then the bottom will spread a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. I noticed the difference. And
I'm
so the parchment paper keeps it from spread.
I as soon as we finish talking today, Cheryl, I have to message a friend of mine. He is developing these cookie recipes for a project that he's working on, and they're delicious. He brought some over the other day, but he was showing me pictures, and he's like, Christine, do you know why? I usually do them on parchment, but everybody online raves about these Silpats, so I try them on Silpats. Look at how weird they ended up. He's like,
Mhm.
is that normal? Did I do something wrong? And I'm like, I have no idea. And now I know. I'm going to say, Cheryl Norris just told me that the Silpat's going to make them spread differently.
Yeah, there's just that enough friction on the parchment paper where they'll stay. And, if you've ever dealt with Silpat, it has that smooth
Yeah, yeah.
surface, which is great. I mean, I love Silpat, especially, for general baking. But
Mhm.
yeah, for these cookies, you definitely want to use parchment paper.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, I love it. I love it. And I love that I have an answer for someone. Yay. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So you're going to take the cookie log out of the refrigerator. At this point, it should be soft enough to just go ahead and cut right away. That's what I've typically found. If your refrigerator is a little colder or when you begin to cut, you find you have to saw through one of two things. You either need to maybe let it sit for 5 minutes or you need a sharper knife and that's the other key to your knife should be sharp. Make sure you have a good sharp knife, maybe sharpen it a little bit before you go to cut the cookies. So, because it should easily cut through the cookie dough.
And not a serrated knife, I'm assuming. You
No,
want a
not a serrated
very
knife. You want a
smooth,
sharp knife.
zoop.
Yeah.
And no sawing, because that's going to distort you really want to
Mhm.
just be able to go
Straight down. Yep.
through. Yep. Got it.
Okay. So let me back up. Sorry. I jumped ahead. So you take the cookies out. What you want to do is now take that egg white that you reserved from earlier and you want to brush the cookie log with the egg white. And you want to take your turbinado sugar. And this is what you want to do. Anytime you're dealing with something like this, always put the turbinado sugar in a separate bowl. Do not reach in the bag because you risk cross contamination because you've been dealing with this egg.
Yeah.
Egg white. So that's for food safety. What you want to do is just put a little bit in a bowl and you can always pour more from the bag if you need it. And then just sprinkle it and pat it along the cookie dough. And then just as you're turn the cookie log, as you're sprinkling it with sugar, some of that sugar is going to end up on your parchment paper below. So just kind of drag it through to make sure you get as much as you can on the cookie log.
And can I just ask you, before you brush the egg white, do you like stir it up with a fork or anything first, or just go straight in with a brush?
Yeah, just go straight in with the brush.
Okay.
So now you start slice about half-inch thick.
Uh-huh.
I have a bench scraper, and what I do is I hold the bench scraper next to the cookie dough, and I mark the half-inch markings
Yes.
with the knife, so then I can have even thickness all the way across. Some people are really good at eyeballing stuff and getting it right, but I like just using that bench scraper to mark the half-inch markings.
I have a, well, I don't know if it's supposed to be dishwasher safe, but I call it a dishwasher safe ruler. That is just for
Yep.
my kitchen. And that
Yep.
I use that for this kind of thing all the time. Yeah.
And I should say with the bench scraper, it depends on what type you have. The one I have has like the markings on it,
Hmm. Hmm.
the measurement marking. So a ruler will work too.
Hmm.
So go ahead and slice the cookies, place them on the baking sheet. Now, if you like things a little extra salty, this is where you can sprinkle the top of each cookie with flaky sea salt as they go in the oven.
Oh.
If you like things a little extra salty, like I do.
Like me. Yeah. Yeah. But you already had the salted butter in the recipe, but no other added
Yeah.
salt, right? It was
No,
just this.
not with the salted butter.
No, so just the salted butter, and then if you want a little flaky sea salt, just boom at the end there.
Yeah, I do. I think I do say somewhere that, hey, if you want a little more salt in your cookie dough, you could add another quarter teaspoon of salt to the dough. But I think the salted butter is enough, especially if you're going to add the flaky sea salt on top.
Hmm. Hmm. Love it. That sounds amazing.
So then you're going to bake for about 15 to 17 minutes
Hmm.
until and this is where you kind of have to play with your oven. So the timing is based on my oven. The particular oven I have discovered over time, it bakes things faster than other ovens. Like this is probably, I don't know, my fourth oven. And when I got it, I immediately noticed that things baked faster in this
Hmm.
particular brand.
Hmm.
I kind of love it because what I found is it doesn't cycle as much. Science
Hmm.
of ovens. Ovens
Yeah.
cycle to maintain that temperature. And this to me doesn't cycle as much. So things tend to bake faster. So one of the things I also advise with this recipe, what you can do with your recipe is go ahead and take a couple of cookies and bake them and see how long they take in your oven. Because it might take more than the 15 to 17 minutes that I call for in the recipe. And what you'll see is the bottom will be like just barely brown. Because kind of what we're trying to do with the shortbread cookies, one of the reasons we cook on low temperature is we're trying to dry it out. Because
Right.
if you think about it, now in this case, because there's egg, we need to cook the egg too.
Hmm.
But in the basic shortbread cookie, there's no egg. And so with the flour, butter, and sugar, you're more trying to dry it out,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
which is why we do low and slow. But yeah, that's kind of my tip is kind of really pay attention to your oven. Like, yeah, the recipe is there as a guidance to tell you how long to expect to bake this. But, when you're baking and you're doing a lot of baking, you know that you have to go by appearance too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Appearance or feel or texture.
And knowing your oven, I think I'm always telling people to get oven thermometers for inside their
Mm-hmm.
ovens because ovens are off all the time. And it
Yep.
makes, for some things, it makes a huge difference. For other things, if I'm cooking up some chicken thighs and, does it matter that
Yeah.
it's 425 or 400? They're going to be juicy and delicious as long as they're cooked through, right? But that's fine. But for other things, it really, really matters. And
Yep.
I get comments sometimes from people doing like a pork loin roast or something. And they'll tell me how long, like I'm telling them, don't go by this because I don't have it at my fingertips, but it's 20 minutes per pound or something. And they're like, it was a
Yep.
3-pound roast and I had it in there for 2 hours. And I'm like, I'm sorry, your oven, your oven isn't working right. But then my oven, we've just pulled out the old oven and a new one is going in later this week because it's been weird for a long time. But for a while now, it's been not cycling, that's a great word, after I open it. And so it preheats and then I
Yep.
open it to put something in there and heat comes out and it just kind of stays where it is for a while
Oh,
before it
okay.
starts kicking back up again, to the point where for the last little while, I've literally been opening it, putting the stuff in and then canceling and setting it to the temperature to force it to go up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So knowing your oven, whatever means
Absolutely.
that is critical for so many things.
Yeah, and sometimes what I've done is I'm baking something, and then as I get ready to put the food in, I realize, oh shoot, I forgot to do XYZ. Oh, I forgot to sprinkle salt on the cookies, and the oven is open. Now the oven's been open for a minute as I'm reaching for the salt,
Yeah.
and then I'm at that point, okay, let me just close the oven, turn it off, turn it back on, and let it get back up to temperature rather than putting the cookies in after leaving the oven open for a minute or so.
I'm just going to say, this is so funny to me. I am loving this so much that we are just totally nerding out over this oven thing, which is exactly what I want to do in these interviews, that we're in the minutia of when your
Yes.
oven doors open for a minute.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize because I remember talking to a coworker and he was talking about his oven, how long things take to cook. And I said, it may not be coming up to temperature. And he was like surprised by that. I said, yeah, get an oven thermometer. I said, they're less than like $10 and see what set it and see what it happens. I said, and the thing is, you can learn to you can have your oven calibrated.
Yes. People
Or
don't know that.
if you figure out that, hey, if I turn this up to 400, it's really at 350, then at least like if you don't want to like pay to have someone to come calibrate your oven, you now know that you need to set it to 400 to get the actual 350.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So much. I love this. Okay. So the cookies are in there 15 to 17 minutes at 325, not really browning, more drying out. And then you take them out.
Yep, you take them out, let them sit on the baking sheet. For about 5 minutes because they're still kind of coming together. They kind of like got a set. And then you just move them to a wire rack to finish cooling and they are ready to eat. These cookies, I would say they're best within the first 5 days, but they will last in a storage container for up to 2 weeks.
In the fridge?
No, actually room temperature. You will notice so those first few days, they're really soft and like towards the end of the 2 weeks, maybe they're a little bit more crumbly. But so I don't know why you would let cookies sit around for 2 weeks, but
who lives in your household that nobody is eating these cookies?
but if you can store them in your refrigerator, if you think they're going to be around for that long, definitely store them in an airtight container. But again, if you're trying to think ahead, like, hey, I want these for a special occasion, then just put them in the freezer. And then the day before, bake them.
The fact, though, Cheryl, that they are shelf stable like that for a while, these would make great care package cookies. Or if you're in any of those cookie exchanges that you send in the mail at the holiday time, anything like that, like this would work really well because you're not going to be worrying that they're out for too long, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they would be great. Yeah, if you're sending to someone through the mail, package them up and send them to one of your favorite people.
Yes.
You only want these cookies for your favorite people.
Only the best people get these cookies. Yes, for sure. Well, Cheryl, this has been so much fun. I've had a blast. Can you let people know where they can find you online if they want more of your recipes, see what you're up to? Where's the best place for them to go?
Yes. So to get my recipes, you can find me at my website, Bakes by Brown Sugar, www.bakesbybrownsugar.com. You can find me on Facebook at Bakes by Brown Sugar, Instagram, Bakes by Brown Sugar, and Pinterest is Bakes by Brown Sugar also.
Bakes by Brown Sugar. We just have to remember one thing. I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Christine. This was fun.
As somebody who doesn't bake very much, I always learn so much when I have these baking experts on as guests. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And you guys, make sure you go check out her recipes at bakesbybrownsugar.com. Okay, now what is going on in my kitchen this week? It is probably not very much baking because I do not do very much of that. Although I have been making a lot of muffins this year for my kids, just quick grab healthy snacks. So I will probably end up making another batch of muffins this weekend. But that's not for work. That's just for us. In terms of the recipe development that I am doing this week, I am doing one more test on the mac and cheese cups. I know I've mentioned this to you before. I am making this recipe where you don't have to already have mac and cheese to make the mac and cheese cups. It's really for when you have leftover pasta of any kind, turning it into something. But I do still want to test if the basics work if you do have leftover mac and cheese. So I'm going to try that this week. And I'm doing another round of testing on the air fryer butternut squash and air fryer acorn squash being done with their seeds in the air fryer at the same time. I did it last week, but I didn't make note of the timing for the seeds. So I'm going to redo it this time and make sure that I have it all perfected. And then I am also working on a cocktail sauce recipe that does not contain horseradish. I know it is sacrilege, right? Why would you want cocktail sauce without horseradish? But it seems that I get this question quite often in the comments for my cocktail sauce recipe. And I think that what's happening is that people are at home, they're Googling for how to make cocktail sauce because they suddenly need it. They don't have any that they bought. They want to make some. And they come to my recipe and discover that it contains horseradish and they don't have horseradish in their house. I always have a jar of like half-used horseradish on the door of my fridge, but I know that I am not everyone. But yeah, they don't have horseradish and then they want to know what to do. And I like a challenge. So I've been trying to come up with a cocktail sauce recipe that still has, the ketchup as the base and has a bit of heat to it like the horseradish, but trying to get like a similar heat profile as the horseradish without using horseradish. And so I've been trying to get there by using a few different heat sources. So the recipe that I have so far has hot sauce like Tabasco and black pepper and some hot mustard powder, that yellow mustard powder, which I think has a similar heat to horseradish. You know what I mean? And then I've also been playing with adding some pickle juice to there to kind of do that like subtle brininess that you get from the jar of horseradish. You know what I mean? Not from fresh horseradish, but I usually use jarred horseradish in my cocktail sauce. So I'm trying to play with that and it's pretty good. I'm going to do one more test this week, maybe play with different hot sauces, sriracha maybe, except I guess if somebody is asking for a recipe for cocktail sauce that doesn't have horseradish, if they don't have horseradish, maybe I shouldn't assume that they have sriracha or anything special other than that either. And on that note, I should test whether we can use something other than the pickle brine, probably like lemon juice or something. That will be the substitution there, I think. So I'll be testing that this week as well. As to what is going live on the sites this week, there are 2 recipes. The first is like evergreen good any time of year, but it came about for a similar reason to the cocktail sauce that I'm working on. So this is a quesadilla recipe that uses corn tortillas instead of flour tortillas. And it is because I've been asked many, many times if you can use corn tortillas when making quesadillas. And my answer was always like, probably, but I'm not sure exactly how. And my concern was when you have corn tortillas, you usually like cook them first. You toast them or something before you turn them into tacos, right? You don't just have them like uncooked. And so I wasn't sure if when you're using them in a quesadilla, if you would like cook one side of the tortillas and then put that as your like middle part of the quesadilla, and then the outside would get cooked when you're actually cooking the quesadilla. So I tested some different ways of doing that: dry toasting, toasting them in oil, and then not pre-cooking them and just going with it, and came to an answer. And so that will be released this week on Cook the Story. And then on the Cookful, I have a recipe. If you follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, I'm Cook the Story in all of those places. If you follow me there, you saw I did a little sneak peek of a recipe coming soon. And that was the pumpkin hot chocolate, which is going live this week on the Cookful. It is so delicious. It has, of course, chocolate. It has pumpkin puree and it has pumpkin pie spice, and it's just like rich chocolate, and like, I want to say it's got that like satisfying, like meaty-ish kind of flavor from the pumpkin. I just really, really like it. You're going to like it too, I'm sure. So stay tuned for that coming live on the Cookful. And you guessed correctly that I will be telling you about that pumpkin hot chocolate on this podcast this week. The corn tortillas are not going out on the podcast this week, but next week. What I do have for you this week is a really decadent grilled cheese that I know I've already been telling you about. It is out and I'm going to be telling you about it. That's the Brie grilled cheese. I am telling you how to make the best turkey gravy. That is, of course, in celebration of Canadian Thanksgiving coming up. I've also got a homemade French dressing recipe, and we have something really lovely for Yom Kippur, which is also next weekend. So lots going on in my kitchen, lots going on my website, lots going on in the podcast, all of it delicious. I cannot wait for you to see and try all of it. I want to say a big thank you to Cheryl Norris from bakesbybrownsugar.com, and thank you to you for listening. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great weekend. Let's get cooking.